Okay, so we're going to start with summary. We're looking at chapter 2. So we'll just start off with a summary of what chapter 2 is going to look like, and then we'll get into it. And hopefully it'll be something to think about and a blessing to you. So summary. This is from Anders' Holman Old Testament commentary. Wisdom must be sought. Like, yeah, we've heard that before. It's like super important. Wisdom must be sought like any rare treasure. When found, it'll save one from violent men and seductive women. It is more valuable than gold and brings true happiness. That's chapter 2 in a nutshell. So we have first, there's an admonition to receive wisdom, and then you receive the benefits of wisdom if you receive it. So first, verses 1 through 4, and then we'll get into, and then once you'll receive the benefits of wisdom, and then it'll protect you as well. It'll protect you from the evil man and from the strange woman or the foreign woman or the seductress. Remember, this is wisdom from a father to a son, and just because it has male pronouns and is talking, man to man, it could equally apply to women. This is wisdom for everybody. But let's read chapter 2 all the way through, and then we'll start going. All right, Proverbs chapter 2, starting in verse 1. My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom and apply thine heart to understanding. Yea, if thou criest after knowledge and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as for hid treasure, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, find the knowledge of God. That's huge. You can know God. For the Lord giveth wisdom. Out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment and preserveth the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. When wisdom entereth into thine heart issue, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul. Discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee, this is where the protection comes in, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things. And froward means perverse or crooked, like confused, confusing. Who leave the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward in their paths. To deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger, which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. Is this talking about just some woman outside of Israel? Within the covenant people? There's a strange woman who flatters with her lips? In the church? No way. Okay. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, or take hold of the paths life. That thou mayest walk in the way of good men, and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it. The first, there's a plea to receive wisdom, an admonition to receive wisdom. And look at verses 1 and 2. You have to choose attentiveness. This is a choice. You have to choose attentiveness to receive wisdom. My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom and apply thy heart unto understanding. You have to choose this. Passive hearing is not enough. You need to actively listen, ask questions, lean in, incline your ear to wisdom. Ask questions. Questioning things is good. Try and get to the bottom of things. Like, does that really make sense? We'll get more into that in a little bit as an illustration. But lean in. Try and understand what when someone's trying to give you life advice. Is that really wise? As it pertains to the book of Proverbs, it's going to give you lots of life advice. Like, think about it. Try and apply it to different situations. Does this actually make sense? You have to choose to do that. Not only that, cry for wisdom. Ask for it. Right? Verse 3. Yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and lift up thy voice for understanding. If you do that, this is the desperate cry of someone who's begging for deliverance. So the person who suffers the consequences of their foolish actions, they usually end up in this spot where they cry for wisdom, but it's too late. Wisdom's laughing at them. Because wisdom comes before you make a bad decision. It's prior. So you should cry for it before you get to that point. Not only that, you need to commit yourself to a determined search for it. Verse 4. If thou seekest her as silver, searchest for her as for hid treasures. If you do those things, these are conditional statements. That's what I mean by it's a choice. It's if you do these things. If you choose attentiveness, if you ask and seek and knock for wisdom, if you commit to a determined search, then you receive the benefits. You do not receive the benefits if you don't do these things. You have to choose it. I mean, just plug in any sermon ever. There's theological truth, and then there's some kind of application. But you have to actually choose to do the application before it can apply to you and you can have a blessing. You have to do something. Don't be passive in your spiritual walk. Seek after wisdom. Seek after wisdom. Search for hidden treasure demands dedication. You ever see the guy with the metal detector on the beach? Just hours sweeping the beach. Like, man, I've been here all day, and so have you. Is your arm, like, how's it not falling off? A determined search. And he's hoping to find, like, a coin, maybe? Like, it's wild. That's the kind of search. You need to place a high value on wisdom. It's important. I have a summary from Ortland. It's his Proverbs Wisdom That Works commentary. I'll quote him now. Well, wisdom is not automatic for us. Wisdom is not our default setting. We'll never get there by drifting. You cannot become a significant person by being neutral and cute and safely unchanged. That is complacency. God is saying to you, my child, I am so available. If you want me more than you want your own status quo, will you give me yourself completely today? Will you say to him right now, I want to change more than I want to stay the way I am? I am now hurling myself into your arms. Say that to God. That's the wholeheartedness God requires. C.S. Lewis explains why, and then he quotes C.S. Lewis from The Weight of Glory. God cannot bless us unless he has us. When we try to keep within us an area that is our own, we try to keep an area of death. Therefore, in love, God claims all. There's no bargaining with him. That's the level of determined search that we should have in seeking wisdom. And it connects wisdom with God, right? Verse 6, for the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. I should have read verse 5. Sorry, verse 5 and 6. Then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God, for the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. So there's a connection between wisdom and the Lord. And if you're asking for wisdom, you're asking for more of the Lord in your life. So what are the benefits? Benefits of wisdom: knowledge of God, protection from God, holiness and moral discernment for living. Again, Ortland. He wants to protect our thoughts from maybe drifting to a works-based salvation. And he says, careful, God is not saying, if you seek me, I will love you more. Not what he's saying. He's saying, if you seek me, you will find me for all that I am worth. And that's where you get more wisdom, the fear of the Lord. So when we understand the fear of the Lord, we find the knowledge of God. Fear of the Lord is a heart attitude towards God. It's a humble heart that's willing to receive correction and instruction from God. And then we get to know who he is. And if you just look at the cross of Christ and what God was willing to do to change your heart, like that's how you get to know God. And I know I always go there, but like Philippians 4, where Paul talks, Pastor smiling, it's like where Paul wants to know the power of the resurrection, the fellowship of his sufferings. Like he wants to know Christ more. Well, you do that by participating in death and resurrection. Like, but I'm still alive. Yeah, this spiritual reality. There are parts of you that need to die, and it's only after they die that they can be resurrected and it can bear fruit. And it's just popped in my head, but not in my notes. Hopefully it's. Anyways, I think it's John 12, where Jesus talks about the seed. Right, the seed has to die before it can bear fruit. So, kind of an analogy for his death and resurrection. Right, he has to be buried, and then he comes back, and now he can make us children of God, and the church can bear fruit in that way. But that's true for revival. If you want revival, something has to die. It's the necessary first step. Something has to die. If you want to receive the benefits of wisdom, your thoughts of being wise in your own eyes has to die. That's what has to die first. Then you can receive wisdom, and then that will grow into a tree and bear fruit that is holiness and has discernment for living. But it has to die first. And as you let those things die and you participate in that death, that's when Jesus can use the Holy Spirit can use the power of the resurrection to reform your life, change your heart, and guide you towards the path of God. But something has to die. So there's probably an area in your heart that has to die. It's the uncomfortable part that probably has to do with some form of rejection in your life, that when you don't see it, when you realize that you'll never be rejected in Christ, always loves, he can't love you any more than he's already loved you. When that really sinks down deep in your heart, it'll change your life. It'll change your marriage. We'll get into that in a second. But that was all free. The notes. But notice it goes to the heart. Where was it? Yeah, verse 10. When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant to thy soul. That's when you get moral discernment for living. Holiness starts in your heart. This is always this has and will always start with the heart. We all need hearts that desire wisdom, but that's not what we start out with. We start off thinking that we're good on our own, that I've got this figured out, or at least I can work it out as I go down this path of life. I can figure things out. I'm not stupid, right? I've got common sense. It seems to be lacking in a lot of people, but I got it. I can definitely point it out in other people, but probably not in myself, right? The fear of the Lord, we need humble hearts. The fear of the Lord starts in the heart. Portland, again, God is able to give your heart a new taste, a new relish, a new instinct for wisdom. If you want to be a better husband, if you want to get out of credit card debt, if you want to know how much TV to watch or not to watch, you do not need someone to beat you down with guilt and pressure. You ever had sermons that felt like that? Yeah. You do not need 5 easy steps to this, or 7 surefire principles for that. You need a new heart, a new character, an awakening deep within. And God is saying, if you seek me, wisdom will come into your heart and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. This moral discernment for living. This is the change of heart that prepares you for living the rest of your life. You'll then be able to make good choices, wise choices, moral choices, choices towards holiness. I thought this was interesting. I got it from Anders' commentary. You find God when you search for wisdom, because he's the one who gives it, right? That's verse 6. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. So in one sense, we find wisdom at the end of a diligent search. In another sense, God just gives it out freely. So it's just his grace. He's just handing it out. He's just slinging it out to everybody. But you have to go search for it. It's still something you have to do. So it's like, is there personal responsibility, or is it just hard determinism? Fate or free will? It's more complicated than that. That's the answer. All right. Summary of verses 12 through 22, which is the rest of the chapter. This is Garrett from his New American Commentary. The young man faces 2 major temptations. The first is the temptation to violence and crime, and to the feelings of power and easy money that way offers. And the second is the easy and apparently uncomplicated sexual pleasures offered by the prostitute. Both ways, however, have complications the young man cannot see, complications that will drag him to his death. So, another benefit of wisdom is protection. It's protection from evil men, verses 12 through 15. To deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things. Leave the path of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, to rejoice to do evil, and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward in their paths. So again, this imagery of a path, right? You're walking down a path, and then it makes a Y, and you have to choose which way you're going to go. Are you going to follow the evil man, or are you going to follow your father's wisdom? Your father's wisdom will protect you from the evil man and going down his path, right? And we already kind of touched on this when we talked about Proverbs 1, 10 through 19, where the evil man is trying to entice the young man into a life of crime. Join our gang. We'll share one purse. We'll go murder people and steal their things. Like, how is that enticing at all? It is. Brother Compton's example was really good. Like, easy money. Just drop this package off at this place. No problem. And now you spend the rest of your life in prison. So, protection from the evil man. Froward, right? That means perverse words. Again, to deliver, verse 12, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things. So how does he get you to join him on his path? Words. You're influenced by this person. And what they say is twisted, right? It's perverse words. He justifies his way of life with a distorted set of values in order to persuade others to join him. That's Garrett from his New American Commentary. So there's a different set of values. And from that set of values, it's a different set of assumptions. But from that set of assumptions, what he says makes sense. Right? It sounds right from a certain point of view. That was for you. Obi-Wan Kenobi just lying to Luke. Okay, there it is. Yeah, it does. That is absolutely right. Yeah, the serpent only said, well, was it even a lie? He said, you will not surely die. What do you mean by die? Because when they ate from the fruit, did they die? not physically. But there's a different kind of death that's worse than physical death, and it's spiritual death. And that's what, again, it's in the heart. That's what God is trying to save us from. But it's twisted, right? The serpent goes, "Oh, is it true that you can't eat from any of these trees? There's trees everywhere with fruit." And he's like, "Oh, no, no, no. We can eat from any tree in all the garden except this one." And he goes, "Oh, I want to talk about that one. Thanks for mentioning that." Little twist. So what about that one? Why is God holding back on that one? She's like, "Well, we're not supposed to eat from that. We're not even supposed to touch it lest we die." Oh, you twisted that on your own. Sweet. You didn't even have to work that hard. Right? It's just, it sounds right from a certain point of view. So again, let's see. This is Ortland again. Here's what you need to know. This is talking about the perverse words, right? The froward, perverse words. Here's what you need to know so that your heart can stay alert as you move among such men this week. Perverted speech is not limited to bad words and dirty jokes. It includes even good words. But good words being used to turn things upside down. Upheaval, turning things upside down and inside out. That is the force of the Hebrew behind the word perverted. And he's right there. I don't know about inside out, but confusion is what's getting at there. So perverted, crooked, confusing. Words should represent reality. Oh, there's so much philosophy in that. Words should represent reality. They should be true to what is. But words can be used to twist reality. Words can be used to flip meanings into their opposite. Bad men use good words to smuggle in bad realities, and some people are fooled. But if wisdom has entered your heart, tricky words just won't pass the whiff test. You might not be able to explain what bothers you, but you will be protected by the wisdom that God has put inside you. So, the first question you should ask when you're hearing these words, does this correspond with reality? Truth is a function of language about reality. I think I've said this before in classes, but to reiterate again, truth is correspondence with reality. Does what you say correspond with reality? If it's no, then it's false. If yes, then it's true. There is no my truth. That's a category error. That doesn't make sense. Does what you're saying correspond with reality? If I say the sun is shining outside, and then you look outside and it's midnight and it's pitch black, my words don't correspond with reality. Okay, that's a simple example. But it's the statement, sun is shining outside, that has a truth value. It's either true or it's false. And we determine that based on whether it corresponds with reality. Now, that could be physical reality, like I just made a statement about what it's like outside. It could be logical truth, like this flows. It's true. I have a certain set of principles. Those principles logically follow from each other, and it's true. As long as it fits a certain pattern, then it's valid as well. Valid, and then if each premise is true, then it's also sound. We don't have time to get into that, but that's the first question. So if you're hearing someone spouting stuff, and you're like, that almost sounds right. Just first go, does this correspond with reality at all? Does what they're saying correspond with reality? That's the first question. Second question, is what they're saying justifying any kind of sin? Is that what they're trying to do with their words? It is. It's wrong. Love is love. Would anyone deny that? Does anybody want to disagree with that? No one's for hate. Love is love. Why are you guys so hateful and bigoted against homosexuals? Love is love. Except for when it exceeds what you're comfortable with. Then it's not love. Right? It's like love is love. But some love is sin. There's also like this whole problem with, in the biblical view, sexuality is not an identity, or sexual acts are not an identity. Like a homosexual act is sin. That's what the Bible teaches. It's pretty plain. Like there's no ambiguity about that. It's an act. It's a sexual act. That's not an identity. And what we do in our culture is we elevate an act to an identity, a state of being. Not an action, but a state of being. I am this thing, or I am this action. That's no. That's not the way the Bible sees it. But that's how it's twisted. And so if you enter into a conversation with someone and they're just like, why, what are you doing? And then you go, well, because that's sin. Then it's like, oh, now you're judging this person's state of being, not an action. And then that just explodes, right? Tolerance is the highest virtue. You should look, you guys, especially you Christians, you go around all the world and you force your Christianity on other cultures. You completely take over and you make them Christians, and then you have all these little Southern Baptist churches all around the world. That's just wrong. How dare you do that? They have an entire culture. They have all these things that they already do that you could probably learn from. You are so arrogant and proud to think that you have the most, you are correct about living. You should have more tolerance. In fact, you should have a humble heart and learn from these other cultures. Oh. I had this conversation with someone one time. That's why it came into my mind. There are some things that ought not be tolerated. My example, remember there's a missionary from Africa, and he came to, I was at church in Tennessee way back when I was in college, and he came and preached Revival Week. Whole week of revival messages from this mission in Africa. And the whole time he preached, he carried around this stick. And it was about yay big, and it was like skinny on one side, it had this bulbous, it was almost like a root that they pulled out of a tree that had this bulbous thing. Anyways, it represented authority. And so anytime he preached, it was like, okay, I am the authority right now. I'm preaching. You need to listen to me because I have the authority. And if there's any kind of meeting with people, you would pass the stick to people. When it was their turn to talk, they had they took on the authority, and then they had the stick, they would speak, and then someone else, you pass it around. It was like this physical thing that represented this idea. Every husband gets one of these when he gets married in this culture to beat his wife into submission because he's the authority. But we should tolerate every culture. No, there are some things that you should not tolerate. But you should. It's the highest virtue. No, it almost sounds right, but it's twisted. Right. Well, right. If you want to take that, so if you take tolerance as the highest virtue, and you make it an ethical system, then it turns out it's called cultural relativism. So each culture has its own set of values and moral principles, and everything within that culture is right within that culture. And if you don't live within that culture, you have no right to judge that culture because that's what's right over there. Now, in our culture, tolerance is a high virtue. But what if you belong to a culture where tolerance wasn't a high virtue? Then being intolerant is actually the virtuous thing to do. This is exactly why we need a Bible, right? We need, by what standard? It's just whatever you want. You have to have some kind of standard. I really don't like this one. Maybe follow me for a second. You just need to forgive yourself. How many have heard that before? You just need to forgive yourself. That really doesn't make any sense to me. Let's say I wrong my wife. Okay, so now there's division between us. And then I beat myself up, hate myself that I wronged my wife again. Say it has to do with porn again, right? I watched porn, she catches me, and now there's a division in our marriage. Like, would that cause a division? Definitely would. Okay, so now like the illustration is clear, right? And I'm beating myself up. Let's imagine in the first case that she forgives me. And then we go through the long process of reconciliation. She can forgive me and we still not be reconciled. Difference there. We'll talk about that in the next example. But let's say she forgives me and we start the process of reconciliation where I have to build trust again to have a good relationship with her. But I still beat myself up. And I think I'm worthless and I hate myself. Then someone comes along and says, hey, you just need to forgive yourself. I'm like, yeah, I should. Does that help me change? Or does it help me just go, that wasn't really a big deal? So what I think is underneath this phrase and why I really don't like it is it makes you God. Because what you really need is the forgiveness of God. You need to accept that that's real. Even for that sin, even though you did it again, even for that one. That's what you really need. But this, you need to forgive yourself idea, what it does is it goes, oh, there's no higher authority than me. So when I do something wrong, I need to forgive myself, which doesn't really make sense because if you're the highest authority, whatever you do isn't wrong. Why would you hold yourself to a standard that isn't the one that you want to hold yourself to? There's just so many layers where it doesn't make sense. But if you forgive yourself, then it's easy to just ignore your failings. Like sometimes guilt and shame are necessary for you to change. It's not the most evil thing to suffer from guilt and shame from a wrong action that you've done. In our culture, it's the worst thing ever. No, you need to accept the forgiveness that Christ has for you. That's what you need to forgive. Because what that does is it makes you face up to your guilt and your shame and then see that there's a God in heaven that came to earth and loved you so much that he died for that. So you're not worthless. Why would God spend so much on you if you were worthless? Your worth, value, and beauty is not determined by some innate quality within yourself. It's determined by the length to which God would go to possess you. That's what you need to understand. And it's all in the heart. It's all in the heart. This is another one, which kind of is similar to, it's a theological justification instead of the need to forgive yourself. Well, it's all under the blood. This terrible thing that you did. Oh, don't bring it up again. It's all under the blood. That's a really easy justification for your sin. To ignore your sin, to just whitewash it over, and that it's no big deal. And then, most likely, continue in it. That's evil and wicked. It's perverse. It's froward, perverse speech. And it's theological in nature. Awful. Now, is there a sense where if you're just like, if you keep hanging on to the guilt and the shame of something that you've been forgiven of, and you keep hanging on to it, and you keep just like hating yourself over, like, you need to let that go. There is a sense where that's the case. But if you flip it on its other side and you go, oh, it's all under the blood. I don't have to worry about that. Like, shall we sin that grace may abound? No. But that's how it can be twisted. It's twisted speech. Does this correspond with reality? Does it justify sin? They cloak their sin in darkness, and they lose all sense of direction. That's the evil. We'll talk about immoral women next week. Yeah. Well, yeah, it'll be immoral women, but also why is that enticing for men? And I think there's at least one thing that will be something to think about. Anyways, we'll get to that next week. Let's